Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Okay, let's get into it because it is February and we've got a controversial topic on the pod today, which I'm actually really excited about because one of the biggest conversations I had last year was with business owners who were just getting a bit frustrated about the difficulty in generating revenue in their business or frustration around trying to build out their sales process. And so they were considering hiring salespeople or had already hired salespeople. And then they'd come to me and ask a series of questions. So today on the podcast, I'm going to answer probably the biggest question of 2024 that I had, which was, should you hire a salesperson to build your B2B revenue stream for you as a coach, consultant, speaker, or trainer? But first, if you are looking to build your B2B sales process this year or improve it and finesse it, if you will, then you need the C-suite in your life. It is an entire portal full of strategies, sales tips, and techniques that will help you skyrocket your revenue and sign higher value corporate deals consistently without stress, overwhelm, and overwork. And you can find the link to join us inside the show notes. So if you have been considering the C-suite and you haven't jumped in yet, well, you're going to want to. 2025 is the year to build your B2B revenue stream in the best possible way. Now, let's talk a little bit about salespeople, shall we? Because as somebody who has been a salesperson for, a very good portion of my life, has hired salespeople for organizations into teams that I was leading, has worked with organizations over the last 10 years to help them hire salespeople and train salespeople to be their most effective, and who has watched a bunch of business owners try and successfully hire salespeople, come to me with problems about hiring salespeople, and who's trained over 20,000 people how to sell successfully B2B, whether they've been salespeople or not, I feel like I've got some experience with this topic. And today I want to dive in because, like I was saying earlier, in 2024, I spoke to lots of coaches, consultants, speakers, trainers, and done-for-you service providers who really wanted to sell to corporates successfully, but who were either really frustrated at their sales process or specifically lack of revenue being generated from their sales process, and who were considering hiring a salesperson and wanted to know what they should look out for. And I also spoke to a lot of people in 2024 who actually had hired a salesperson to be responsible for helping them grow their coaching, consulting, speaking, training, or done-for-you service provider business, and who were surprised by just, the lack of results. So let's talk about whether people who are generating less than 150K a year as a coach, consultant, speaker, trainer, done-for-you service provider, whether they should be hiring salespeople into their own business for a start, and what the common pitfalls or observations are that you might want to look out for. So you will note here that I've started in a relatively unusual way for the podcast and specified a revenue level. So if you're somebody who is generating less than 150K a year in revenue yourself for your own business, then a salesperson probably shouldn't be top of your list for hiring. All right. And there are some practical reasons around that. Salary, paying somebody else's specifically. And two, because actually the cost, and I'm going to dig into it later, can be very, very high. And we're talking about not only the cost of the hire itself, but also in terms of results and speed and those kinds of things. If you are operating at over 150K in your business, that usually would indicate that you have some sort of sales process that is measurable and that you may be able to replicate using a salesperson. Obviously, there will be some of you who might be listening to this thinking, Jess, I'm at over 200K a year and I don't have a sales process that I would consider to be replicable because I don't track my metrics. And if you don't, that is there's something you're going to want to work on, but it will make decisions about whether or not you hire a salesperson a little bit different. So let's dive in and start looking at the common reasons that people should consider before they decide to hire a salesperson. And the first place to start, obviously, is why would you hire a salesperson anyway? Now, you might be thinking, well, Jess, that's a really stupid question. I want to hire a salesperson because I hate sales and because my revenue isn't growing as quickly as I would like. Get that. Or you might be thinking, stupid question, Jess, I want to expand my business and a salesperson can help me cover more ground or break into more industries. Now, completely valid schools of thought and completely logical. Also completely normal. Many people feel this way. However, most small business owners actually haven't built out a measurable, proven process. So hiring a salesperson and hoping that they would be able to do that for you is a really big risk because most salespeople are really, really good at selling themselves. That's why they're in sales. And do you know what most salespeople actually really struggle with? New business development. It's a really, really rare skill. And I'm talking unicorn skill. And that's why companies pay people like me. So people who love new business development, love the thrill and adrenaline of building out a new business area, love taking on the challenge of doing lead generation from scratch in new business areas and new regions, and building out their initial sales and then passing it over to more account managers or people who just want to specialize in industry. That's why they pay us more. And they pay new business development executives and specialists significantly more than anyone else because these are rare skills. And you might be thinking, well, Jess, you always talk about salespeople aren't that bright. And that can be true. What I would also say is new business development is incredibly difficult work in that it's very time consuming if you don't know what you're doing. It's full of rejection if you're not using a proven process. It can be soul destroying if you're not getting the results that you want in the time frame. And you as a small business owner who is listening to a sales focused podcast may already have experienced some of these feelings. And if you are somebody who's like, oh my God, I feel like that sometimes about my sales process, then A, you are not alone. Some qualified salespeople will stay away from new business development their entire career because they don't know what to do and they don't know how to do it effectively. And B, you might then understand a little bit why, or a little bit about why new business development is so important to develop as a skill and hone as a skill as a small business owner. Because certainly in your first year of developing outbound B2B sales processes, you're going to be doing a lot of new business development activities. And if you don't know what you're doing or when you're supposed to do things or who you're supposed to target or the metrics that you're supposed to operate to or proven processes to actually create the results you want, well, it's going to be really difficult. And that is what people experience. And unfortunately, a lot of small business owners think that hiring a salesperson will remove a lot of that pain. And unfortunately, a lot of the time it doesn't. So why is that? Well, there are a few reasons. One is salespeople who are on commission or freelance or, working for multiple businesses, they don't have tons of time. Because if you can imagine, they still have to get clients and sign clients every single month to generate revenue. And so working with multiple clients across multiple industries and often multiple regions is quite hard. Sometimes they will try and reduce the workload by implementing or using AI to support them, and that never goes particularly well. And also because most salespeople who are really good at business development, new business development, are being paid huge amounts of money and huge amounts of commission from organizations, just like I was when I worked for companies, to do that. And the average small business owner cannot compete with those kinds of salaries. And so therefore they're not getting the best talent in the market building out new business. They're getting the people who've decided to go freelance and who may or may not be as experienced or have the same skills as somebody who has always been in new business development and, is working extensively as a specialist in those areas. So the other thing that can really be tricky is that if a freelance sales consultant is coming into a small business and they're working with multiple clients across multiple industries, disciplines, regions, etc., and they're promising that they're going to build out your sales pipeline, that can be really difficult for you to know how if you don't already have a measurable and metrics-driven sales process for them to replicate. Because then you're at the mercy of whatever they say they hope is going to work or that they've done before and does work, and the results that goes on to get for you. Okay? So because most small business owners haven't actually built their own successful sales process, there are no measurable metrics that you can give to a sales consultant coming in to do this for you and say, hey, look, based on my results, I would expect you to be getting this percentage of response rate from outreach. I would be expecting you to get this conversion rate from call to proposal. I would be expecting you to get this conversion rate from proposal to sale. And so because most small business owners don't have those metrics or that measurable sales process for themselves, they really are totally reliant on whatever that freelance sales consultant says that they can or cannot do, and whatever results they end up getting. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's okay, Jess, I'm just going to hire a really good person. And we would all love to do that. But actually, one of the other big problems that can happen, and I see this a lot in the organizations that I work with, is that hiring salespeople is hard. I've worked with companies that have been super successful, as in have made between 10 and 20 million pounds a year in turnover, who have only managed to retain one salesperson or two salespeople across a 5 to 8 year period. Because what they found is that hiring salespeople is hard, retaining them is harder. And because, again, salespeople are good at selling themselves, but not necessarily doing the doing, it can be really hard to get the ROI that they expected. So I work with a lot of companies to go in and not only support them in the hiring process and identifying the right talent and putting them through their paces at interview, but also then on the ongoing training and development process. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But most small business owners have never hired a salesperson before. So they don't actually know what they're looking for and what skill sets they're looking for. So often, and you'll have heard me talk in this episode so far about new business development, but some of you may not know what new business development is or what the sales activities that are required in new business development are, or indeed how to do those things. So if you don't know how to do those things or what they mean, it's going to be really difficult to create a job description for somebody. It's going to be really difficult to know what platforms you should be advertising that job on. And it's also going to be really difficult to interview people to get the right person for the role. I think a lot of the time when coaches and consultants and service-based business owners generally are thinking about hiring a salesperson, they can be so caught up in the fact they just don't want to do sales activity, or they just hate sales and want to get rid of that job, that they don't necessarily prepare in the best way for having a salesperson. And that starts with knowing exactly what you want from a salesperson, what you want them to do, being able to create an effective job description, being able to effectively advertise that job, being able to effectively interview a range of candidates so that you can actually see whether somebody's good or not, or whether they're just showing up on Zoom for, a virtual coffee with you and saying, yeah, sure, it sounds like I could definitely do that. Right? And we all fall into this trap, just so you know, like big companies do it all the time. In fact, sales actually has one of the highest attrition rates of any job. So I worked for a company years ago who were amazing. They actually had a really, really good industry leading training program in place for new salespeople because they recognized just how expensive it was to hire and then lose their new graduates. And they had an attrition rate of over 80% in the first year. And they were good, right? They were a great company. They had, like I say, a leading training program. They really wanted to provide support. And the attrition rate was high. And they expected that because sales is hard. It is hard work. It's discipline more than anything. It's discipline, it's implementation. It is teaching people how to use sales techniques effectively, getting rejected regularly. And surprise, surprise, like not many people enjoy all of those things, especially when they don't know what they're doing. So a lot of companies still have very, very high attrition rates when it comes to hiring and retaining salespeople. And that can be a really expensive mistake. So because we know that the personality types that most people want for sales are quite similar, everyone thinks they want the really outgoing, confident person who just is going to give it their all and see if they can get the sale. We tend to look for those people in sales or interview processes for salespeople and think that they'll be great. And actually, without full training, without a measurable metrics-driven sales process that they are supposed to replicate, without full access to understanding the products and services that they're supposed to be selling and the ideal client that they're supposed to be targeting, it's very, very difficult to get the return. So if we start looking at the risk factors, and I think we should start with cash because that is really important to me, certainly as a business owner, cash is really important. What we start to think about when it comes to hiring a salesperson is that it obviously costs money in salary. And look, don't get me wrong, you can find people who say, oh, I'll take commission only. And that's, to be honest, a whole different kettle of fish because some of the sales techniques that people can use when they're selling commission only can be driven by the fact that they need sales in order to generate revenue from themselves. And they won't necessarily take into account your reputation in the market, credibility, the offers you want to deliver, and what they're actually sold can be slightly different. There's lots of things that can happen there. Not to say they will, but they can. Because the person is paid on commission only and therefore mostly worried about their own revenue and not necessarily worried about delivering capacity and other things that may matter to you. On a salaried basis, so if we look at a lot of the companies that hire sales teams and a lot of the ones that I've worked with over the years and supported with training development programs, most companies will actually give new salespeople, a grace period where they don't actually have to bill or they don't expect them to bill. So they don't expect them to sign a deal in that time. And most of those companies will have a grace period of between 3 and 6 months, depending on somebody's experience level beforehand. And they will also usually, hopefully, have a training development process in place or program in place to help support those people to get their first sales over the line. Because even experienced salespeople, when they go to new companies and they have to learn about new products or service suites, or they are targeting new markets, or they have very clear restrictive covenants that they're not allowed to breach from previous companies, they have to build up a client base again. And that is hard work, as you guys know, because that's what you're trying to do, right? So most companies will have a clear training development process or program that will support them through their grace period. And like I say, that grace period where they are not expected to bill, they are just expected to be a cost on the business, is between 3 and 6 months. For a small business owner who has no measurable sales process in place themselves, so they have no successful current sales process, they don't know what their own metrics are and their own success rate, and they don't have a training program to onboard new sales hires, that grace period, that period where they're not billing, is going to be an awful lot longer, particularly if that sales consultant or person that you're hiring is not an expert in your industry or the industry that you want to work with or the services that you offer. And the practical reasons behind that are because they will have to do all of the lead generation kind of work that I teach inside the C-suite. They will also have to learn your offers or services to be able to effectively sell to your stakeholders. They will also have to understand quite a lot about your business and how you want it represented in the market to go out and do that. So if you have no training for them, no sales process that they can replicate, no sales assets like lead generation templates that are proven, or proposal templates that are proven, or anything like that, you're looking at probably 6 to 9 months without them making a bean, right? That's a long time. And if we put that into real terms, so let's say you get a graduate who is super, super keen, really good people skills, you're looking at paying them at least 20 to 24K a year. Lower end of the scale if they're working virtually, higher end of the scale if they're living in a city. And that's kind of your minimums, right? You'll have to accept that 6 to 9 months of that, they won't make any money. So 6 to 9 months of your paid time with them, that's going to cost you between £15,000 and £18,000 in real terms. And you have to think, can my business afford that? Because it's a lot of money, And so when you think about your business and where it's currently at, and, a salesperson, they'll really help me grow and all of those kinds of things. Potentially, yes, but it is going to take time if you don't have the right onboarding experience and training program and assets for them to use. And if you can't afford up to £18,000, potentially more, depending on where you live and rates of pay and things, if you can't afford that while money isn't coming in, then hiring a salesperson is not a wise idea. And that's the reality that I think we don't talk enough about as small business owners sometimes, is, knowing what the actual costs are. The other risk factors can be things that are potentially more impactful even than the lost revenue. So things like understanding that a salesperson coming into your business, they don't know you, your business, your products, or the industry for the transformation that you're providing in the same way. And if you don't have a clear sales process that's proven or a training program in place, like we've already talked about, it's actually really difficult to blame them if they do mess up a sales process, if they don't land a deal, or worse, if they mess up your reputation in the market. Sometimes salespeople, like anyone, they want to do a good job, right? So they want to close the sale, and sometimes that, particularly if they're inexperienced, can come at all costs. What usually happens then is you'll have the salesperson who's working really, really hard, trying to close deals for you, wanting to prove themselves, all for really, really good intentions. But sometimes we'll sell things that you don't actually want to deliver, or that your company doesn't sell. And you might be laughing, thinking, oh God, Jess, who would do that? But I see this. I see this at companies I go to, and these are well-established organizations with very, very clear offer and product suites. And it's not because the salesperson doesn't know what's in them. It's because they're so desperate to get it over the line that they'll compromise boundaries, or compromise scope. They'll compromise price. So if you haven't worked out what your profit margins are on things, and a salesperson is suddenly giving somebody a discount of 25%, that's a problem. Some companies can actually operate at a loss when they're hiring salespeople because their salespeople are not developing their negotiation skills, not developing their objection handling skills. So they're charging a lot less than they should be for things. And, that becomes a problem for profit margins. It becomes a problem for cash flow, and it becomes a big, big problem for small business owners if they're selling lots and lots of things that are all just slightly different or slightly customized. Because you might think, oh, well, it only takes me an hour to customize this presentation here. But if they're doing that 6, 7, 8 clients, that's suddenly an entire day's work gone for you. Yeah. And if the average transaction value isn't there or at what the level it needs to be because they're not the best negotiators and they're not sticking to the prices, again, it's a real issue. Yeah. So there can be very large risk factors. And if you can't afford to take those risks on or from a reputational standpoint, from a cost perspective, in terms of that 15 to 18K of just unpaid or paid lack of revenue, then instead of hiring a salesperson, you need to be thinking about training yourself in sales. So joining something like the C-suite where you can implement a proven process, where you can then develop a sales process that is working, that is measurable, that is proven, where you have got customized sales assets, and then you can bring somebody in and onboard them properly if that's what you want to do. But because the risk factors are so high and because the cost involved is so high in that, it's definitely something that you should be thinking about before you launch into the excitement and adrenaline of, oh gosh, I'm going to get a salesperson, I'm going to make loads of money, and it's going to be wonderful, because that isn't always the reality. Yeah. And it can be a costly and time-consuming decision. It also doesn't really matter what you call them. So, we talked a little bit earlier about language. Some people around the internet will say that you just need a closer. You need somebody who can get on your calls and close. Now, that's got interesting connotations all of itself. And generally, closers are designed to take warm leads that you have generated and booked a call with and close them on the call. But if you're somebody who has experienced bad closing in the past, i.e. the people who are like, well, if you really wanted something, you'd sell a kidney, then you might think twice about hiring a closer without any experience training them or making sure that they're going to be the right consultative fit for your business. We also have things like new business development executives. So people that are supposed to be able to map out the market for you, who are able to target, approach, identify stakeholders successfully and book qualified sales calls with them. And, you have the people who'll just say, I just want someone to help me break into a particular market, or someone to help me grow the business, or someone to help me scale my sales. It doesn't really matter what you call it. They're all salespeople and they all rely on different skill sets. So a closer, for example, will be somebody who is designed to get to a decision and will use whatever sales methods they've been taught to try and get to a yes. A new business development executive will see it as their role to generate as many calls for you as possible, qualified, or you'll have to qualify them on the calls, which can be time consuming. And, somebody who says they'll help you because they've got experience in the market. They may have relationships that they can leverage, but you don't know how long that will take, and they will need skills in terms of leveraging their network. They'll need to make sure they're not breaching restrictive covenants, or your company could actually be in trouble and liable for mistakes, and you don't want that either. So it doesn't matter what you call a salesperson, whether you're saying that you want a closer or a new biz development exec or an account manager, unless you know what skills are required in those roles and how to interview to find out whether those people have those skills and have a training process in place or a sales process that they can replicate. It's going to be a very, very time-consuming, lengthy process. And you will find that, you may make mistakes along the way, because that's just what happens when we hire people. As somebody who's had a business for 10 years, almost 11 now, I've hired multiple people over the course of my career, and a lot of them haven't been a good fit. That's not because they weren't great people. It's just because, each job role in a business has a purpose. And sometimes when you're an inexperienced business owner, or you haven't hired that many people before, or in my case, you're not a great people manager, and I'm very open about that. What can happen is you hire people you hire the right person, but for the wrong purpose, or you hire, the right person, but at the wrong time, or you hire somebody who you think could be great, has really good potential, but you don't have a training process or program in place, so they never fulfill it. And it ends up just being quite a disheartening experience if you don't know what you're doing. And I've got a background in recruitment, so I'm sharing that these mistakes happen to me, to companies that I work with, not because it's, you should never hire anyone, but because it's such a big decision. One of the modules that I have inside the C-suite is called Start to Scale. And it's actually where business owners use the module to decide what kind of business model they want to build, and actually what kind of resource, human or system, that they will need to make that happen. These are big decisions and they impact your bottom line. They impact your ability to stress less about your business. They impact your ability to do other things, because if you're investing a lot of money into a salesperson and their salary, you might not be able to pay yourself as much temporarily. You might not be able to invest in systems or programs or things that actually could move the needle for you. So, any kind of decision about the business that you're building and the way that you scale it and grow it is a serious one. And it impacts not just that area of the business, but also others. Yeah. So the final thing I would say is, on that note, if you do end up hiring somebody, what can you do to make the process positive? Well, the first thing is hire somebody in sales when you're ready to do that, meaning when you have a measurable, scalable sales process that is already proven and working for you. So something where you can look down at your metrics every single month and say, I know exactly what their response rate should be. I know exactly what their conversion rate from calls to proposals should be. I know what their conversion rate from proposal to sale should be based on your own. You should be putting a training program in place for them to onboard them in their first 90 days, not just because it actually helps to set them up for success and helps them become better at their job and gets you a higher ROI, but also because most people will leave within the first 90 days. So if they're not onboarded correctly, if they don't have a training program, if they're not really sure what they're doing, you'll find that they leave quite quickly. And then again, you've wasted money, time and energy, potentially bringing somebody into the business, paying them and not seeing that return. And because having a training program in place for them will make it much more likely that they'll see the results that you want from them quicker. And you might think, but just the whole point of hiring a salesperson is so that they can do this stuff for me. I don't want to have to train them. And that is a completely normal thought. It's actually why I work with some of the world's leading companies on training their salespeople, because lots of people managers think like that. Lots of sales directors have thought like that in the past. And unfortunately, that school of thought means that most salespeople are very much undertrained. And if they are good, they don't leave their job, right? They don't leave to go and work for multiple coaches and consultants doing their sales for them. They either stay in their very lucrative, lovely sales job where they're getting paid regular commission, where they already have clients on their books, where they can guarantee themselves a 6-figure salary and 6-figure commission payment each year. Or like me, they go into sales training and consulting where they can work a lot less hours and, make more impact on the new generation of salespeople. So, what you will find is that the best salespeople out there are usually the most expensive. And so unless you've got something that is going to help set them up for success right from the beginning, you could end up paying a very, very high salary, very, very high monthly cost for somebody who arguably could have been absolutely phenomenal when working for a large company where they were adequately supported, where they already had a client base, where the company had a database that they could access of leads that they just needed to convert, or were in a completely different sales situation than you and your brand new business. If they're not set up to succeed when they start working with you, they're unlikely to stay and they're unlikely to get the return that you want them to have. So if you do want them to be successful, it's super, super important that you hire the right person for your business. So, that you think about what you actually want from them in the job role and whether you want them to do the full end-to-end sales lifecycle, so right from cold lead into paying customer, or whether you only want them to do parts of the sales process. You want them to be onboarded successfully into your company to fully understand the products and offers and industry that you want to target. You also want to have sales assets that they can use, whether that be things like templatizing a proven lead generation process or sales part of the sales process for them, or whether it's things like case studies, testimonials, and things that they're able to use as part of their sales process. Although I will say they're not the most effective sales tools in the world, but that's a different episode. So you'll want to have those things. You'll want to have metrics that you can give them and support them with in monthly or quarterly appraisals. And you'll also want to be able to support them in troubleshooting, because, companies, like I say, they have this grace period for people not to bill because they understand that actually the first 3 to 6 months for even an organization with a great training program, that person's having to build their market. They are having to create new metrics around their sales process because things are different. They might have a big well-known brand behind them or a not so well-known brand behind them. There are lots and lots of variables, that come in to those kinds of experiences. So because of that, you will want to have processes and programs and training and support and reviews and all of that kind of thing for any salespeople that you onboard to make it the most successful process possible. All right. The final thing that I will say is that if you haven't already, and I know I've harped on about this throughout this episode, and you can choose to kind of think about it cynically, as in Jess is just saying that if you haven't done it yourself, you shouldn't be hiring a salesperson because she sells training courses on this. You can choose to think that way. But the reality is, if you haven't learned to build a sales process for your own business, it is virtually impossible to manage somebody else to do it for you. And that's not because they won't want to. It's not because they don't want to be successful at building that out for you. It's not because of some of the other practicalities that we mentioned throughout this episode. It's because you are going to be solely reliant on them. And that means that you have to believe them at face value. So if they're telling you, well, the market's bad right now, so you're just not going to make sales for 6 months because nobody's buying, you can't argue with that because you haven't done it yourself. You don't know. You can't troubleshoot. You can't support them. If they say, well, nobody's got budget right now, well, you're just going to have to believe them. Even if you're seeing lots of people from programs just like the C-suite selling successfully and selling in your industry or selling in your area of expertise, because your salesperson isn't doing it and you are not necessarily qualified with the management skills in sales to be able to support them in doing things differently or analyzing why they're not getting the results that you want them to. You have to believe them at face value when they say, if we just created a different offer or a different product, then people would want it more. Because again, you maybe haven't got to grips with the commercial benefits that you're offering, the way to articulate the transformation, the way to troubleshoot, their sales calls so that you can understand why or why not people are buying from them. Yeah. And so when you haven't created a proven sales process for your own business and for your own products and services, it is impossible to manage somebody else to do it because you are solely reliant on their experience. You're solely reliant on what they're saying that they're doing in terms of activity. And you're solely reliant on the fact that they are doing the right things with very little ability to troubleshoot, to support, to train, to even argue the point or push back when they're not getting the results that you want them to get. So you have to think very, very carefully. And it's not to say don't do it, but it is to say that if you're not generating 150K in your business, you definitely shouldn't be considering that as the first point of call. And if you are generating over 150K, you absolutely can start to think about hiring a salesperson, but you need to put decent processes in place. And if you're listening to this episode thinking, oh my God, I don't know what my metrics are, or I don't have clear sales assets, or actually, I've been super reactive about sales and I'm just getting lots of sales from my network, then hiring a salesperson is not the best investment for your business. But figuring out and learning how to build a metrics-based sales process that works, that 100% is worth your time. So once you have learned to build that B2B sales process yourself that is metrics focused, then you can create predictable income, which can give you the cash flow to hire a salesperson successfully. You can start to outsource parts of the sales process, the lead gen process, the delivery processes, if you decide that you actually really love selling, like a lot of my clients, and you don't want to do lots of delivery anymore. You can start to do that, and you can start to embed sales training processes and sales assets into your business that set that person up for success and get the results that you want them to get. But without having that in place yourself, virtually impossible to do. And, there are episodes on the podcast. There are clients of mine who have been part of the C-suite over the years who have successfully done this, who've really nailed their own sales processes and then gone on to outsource parts of either their sales or delivery processes. One of the most recent episodes like that was the From Solopreneur to CEO, how Roz built a successful leadership development company episode, where Roz openly shared that actually she'd got to the point where her average transaction value was above 50K, where she was actually really enjoying the sales process so much that now she's taken on people to deliver the client experience for her business as a result of what she had put in place from the C-suite to build out her proven sales process and to then be able to go on and make huge amounts of sales and huge amounts of revenue, but doing it herself and actually getting the support elsewhere in her business to give her that capacity to go on to sell successfully. And there are other people and other episodes of the podcast that talk about that. We've got a really great episode with Andy Storch as well, where he talks about having a hugely successful sales quarter. We've got episodes from people who have been really clear that as they're expanding their business, it's gone into expanding it with other facilitators or coaches or consultants because they've started to really enjoy the sales process that they've created, the relationships that they build, and the way that they're able to build their business as a result. So in short, don't think that hiring a salesperson is A, the best decision, B, the easiest decision, C, the quick fix decision to, a sales process that isn't currently working, or D, something that you should actively avoid forever. You just need to think it through really, really seriously. Take things into account, take all the information that we've discussed today into account and decide what's best for your business. But if you don't already have a proven sales process, the simple answer is, should you hire a salesperson to build a B2B revenue stream? No, absolutely not. Don't waste your money. Up to £18,000 of it. Instead, buy the C-suite. Join now, build out your sales process, build something that's proven, that works, that generates you clients consistently, and then you can work on your overall business building from there. I'll see you in the next episode.